Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, what is the fear of abandonment we see associated with borderline personality disorder? If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. That way you won't miss anything new. So when we look at the definition of borderline personality disorder in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM, we see that there are 9 criteria and at least 5 have to be met for a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. Criterion 1 states frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. And that's really what we're referring to here when we say fear of abandonment. Now, fear of abandonment is sometimes referred to as autophobia. However, autophobia technically is a fear of being alone. Most of the time we think of these as the same thing, but technically they're not synonymous. There's a subtle difference there. It's also important to remember that a fear of abandonment is not technically required for a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. There are 9 symptom criteria and only 5 are required. None of the symptom criteria are mandatory. Usually with borderline personality disorder, we do see that this criterion is endorsed, that this symptom is present, but not always. Fear of abandonment can also stand alone or be related to another disorder. So somebody could just simply have a fear of being abandoned, or it could be a symptom of dependent personality disorder or separation anxiety. It doesn't necessarily have to be related to borderline personality disorder. We do think of this fear of abandonment as being a cornerstone to borderline personality disorder and being connected to the other symptoms in many cases, and I'll talk about this in a few moments. So with this fear of abandonment, we usually think of this as related to a romantic partner. So an individual with borderline personality disorder who meets the symptom criterion, this fear of abandonment would be related to a romantic partner, a spouse, but it doesn't have to be. It can also be a friend, a member of the family. It can even be a mental health clinician. Most of the time, of course, it is related to a romantic partner, and that's what we see in many of the presentations of borderline personality disorder. Now, this fear of abandonment can be triggered by any number of circumstances. Of course, actual abandonment or rejection, but also the canceling of plans, being late, bringing another person to a meeting. So if an individual who meets the symptom criterion expects one person to come to a meeting and that person brings somebody else, that can be a trigger. We also see if someone leaves unexpectedly or early from a meeting or engagement, that could trigger this fear of abandonment. Now, I indicated that we usually think of the frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment as being a cornerstone in borderline personality disorder. And these frantic efforts can contribute to or lead to the other symptoms we see in the definition for borderline personality disorder. So this is one symptom. There are 8 other criteria. In clinical presentations, we often see these frantic efforts most directly related to the unstable and intense relationship pattern, impulsivity in ways that can be potentially self-damaging, suicidal behavior, gestures, threats, or self-mutilating behavior, affective instability, anger, and paranoid ideation. So that only leaves 2 other symptom criteria, identity disturbance and a feeling of emptiness, and sometimes we see these frantic efforts tied to those symptom criteria as well. Of course, it's not uncommon to see these efforts in a form that really aren't directly related to the symptoms of borderline personality disorder, like stalking, calling excessively, or texting excessively. So the frantic efforts don't have to be other symptom criteria for borderline personality disorder. Now, one of the main features of these frantic efforts are that they really form a self-fulfilling prophecy. An individual with borderline personality disorder that meets the symptom criterion will often drive romantic interest or friends or family away because of this intense fear of abandonment and those frantic efforts mentioned in the symptom criterion. So this fear of abandonment can lead to a cycle that's distressing and results in a number of symptoms and functional impairment. So it's really a destructive cycle that's all potentially started because of this fear of abandonment. I hope you found this description of the fear of abandonment we see associated with borderline personality disorder to be interesting. Thanks for watching.